The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Be a movie, yeah, we're gonna be a movie,
Starring everybody
and me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily. Be a movie, we can watch it all develop, starring everybody
and me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
Both keys at the same time? You think you've beaten me, haven't you? The Philly Flash. Yes, that's right. We are here on another triple feature, and I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And this is Black History Month, as you know, as we roll on. And tonight, as we celebrate Black cinema, we are celebrating the life and times of legendary comic Richard Pryor. And of course, here to help me do that is my brother from another mother, Mr. Jason Teasley. How do you do, sir?
Doing good, doing good. Happy to get back on track to movies that actually don't suck.
Oh my God. You're a little too hard on last week's movies. I feel like you're being a little ridiculous. So you're treating them like they're Nerdland.
They're not that bad, but they're damn close.
Okay, well,
I want to say Children of the Corn remake bad.
Oh my God, you're a ridiculous human being. Well, yes, tonight we are celebrating the life and times of legendary comic Richard Pryor. We're looking at Car Wash, which was an ensemble piece of which he has a cameo. He has one scene, but it's a legendary piece of cinema, so we wanted to talk about it. One of my favorite movies as a kid, Brewsters Millions, and probably, like, other than maybe Superman 3, my most outstanding memory of Richard Pryor. And then another movie I remember as a kid, though not as well, and I've definitely not seen it as many times as I've seen Brewsters Millions. The Toy, starring legendary comedian Jackie Gleason, as well as Richard Pryor. So we've got some fun Richard Pryor movies here to talk about. First, let's get this out of the way now. Richard Pryor was born on December 1st, 1940, and he died December 10th, 2005. He was an American stand-up comedian actor. He reached a broad audience with his trenchant observations and storytelling style, and is widely regarded as one of the greatest and most important stand-up comedians of all time. He won a Primetime Emmy and 5 Grammy Awards. He received his first Kennedy Center Mark Twain Prize for American Humor in 1998. He won the Writers Guild of America Award in 1974. He was listed at number 1 on Comedy Central's list of all-time great stand-up comedians, which I don't disagree with. In 2017, Rolling Stone ranked him first on the list of the 50 best stand-up comedians of all time. Pryor's body of work includes numerous concert films and recordings. He won Grammy Awards for Best Comedy Album for That Person's Crazy in 1974. Is It Something I Said? Bicentennial Person. Richard Pryor Live on the Sunset Strip. Richard Pryor Here and Now. He's also known for Richard Pryor Live and Schmokin'. Wanted Live in Concert. Richard Pryor Live in Concert. He was a co-writer for the Mel Brooks satirical Western comedy film Blazing Saddles. A Black Sheriff? As an actor, he starred mainly in comedies. He gained acclaim for his collaborations with Gene Wilder, including films Silver Streak, Stir Crazy, and See No Evil, Hear No Evil, and Another You. He also acted in such films as Uptown Saturday Night, Blue Collar, The Wiz, California Suite, Superman 3, Harlem Nights, which we talked about last year, Lost Highway, which we talked about last year. He's also appeared on Sesame Street, The Muppet Movie, and he was the host of The Richard Pryor Show and Pryor's Place. So, Jason, now that you're back, I got into Richard Pryor's comedy after Bill Cosby. I think my earliest memories of stand up are of maybe like Bill Cosby and Robin Williams because I had their album, which must have been my dad's. I just inherited it from him. And then I think I knew Richard Pryor mostly as a comedy actor. Like I remember him in Superman 3. I remember him in Brewsters Millions. I didn't see much of him in the Gene Wilder stuff, though. I knew they existed. And I got into his stand-up comedy later, and I think the first one I ever heard was Live on the Sunset Strip, which my most vivid memory of Live on the Sunset Strip is him talking about, the use of the N-word and how like going to Africa changed him, and just like his whole approach to the way he treated people around him, and and Black people in general. So going back though, listening to his older stand-up routines, just how Richard Pryor definitely was in your face. He definitely from that Red Fox school of like almost like underground comedy. So while I have you for half a second, what are your memories of Richard Pryor growing up?
Yeah, the Wi-Fi here at this hotel is not great. Richard Pryor growing up for me was really one of the very first blue comics I was introduced to. I got a little bit of taste of him with some of the Gene Wilder stuff, but my introduction to him was actually the toy, which we will be talking about later. That was the first movie I ever seen of him. Then I got introduced to his comedy specials and stuff, and it was really eye-opening, which turned me on to a lot of the uh, stuff I grew to love, such as the Eddie Murphys, the Carlins, um, and surprisingly, it actually lent me down the road of discovering Bill Cosby as a stand-up. I knew him.
Jason's Wi-Fi is having some difficulties tonight, so I'm sure he'll be back with us momentarily. So I remember Richard Pryor in like the Muppet movie as the balloon salesman. One of the things I think I can safely say about Richard Pryor was if you looked at his stand-up, a lot of it was, I said before, very in your face. Almost like dangerous. Richard Pryor, as I remember him on stage, could be a pretty intimidating, kind of not violent, but just definitely the kind of he definitely come across as like a tough guy. And then you'd see him in movies like Brewsters Millions or The Toy, and he had this really sweet side to him. I don't think Richard Pryor gets the credit that he should for having the range that he did, where he could very likely cut you with a knife on one hand, and on the other, be the kind of genteel, warm, fatherly figure that feels very unassuming and unobtrusive, non-threatening. And it's a credit to his ability as an actor that he could pull that off.
Yeah, and I do apologize. I mean, like I said, the Wi-Fi where I'm at this hotel is absolutely shitty. So I'm gonna try to do it without the cam to try to improve the cut down on the bandwidth. But like I was saying, it did introduce me to a lot of the comedians and the comics that I love. But like you were saying, Richard Pryor was so quick-witted,
Yeah.
and he could cut you quick, much like a Dave Chappelle now could.
Yeah.
And a lot of people definitely make that comparison a lot. Dave Chappelle is the Richard Pryor of the modern generation because you do have that quick wit, you do have that very blue, unapologetic tone, um, and very charismatic. He could be very compassionate. He could be very forthcoming and have that really um, connection with his audience. But also he could be the most vile individual to someone if they crossed him and just dissect somebody with words and just
Yeah.
obliterate them. Um,
He very
to
famously told Eddie Murphy regarding Bill Cosby's comments about all of his cursing that if the people are enjoying it, tell Bill Cosby to have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up.
right, and that's what his personality was. He doesn't care. He worked blue, and he was very good at it, and it made him a lot of money, and he parlayed that into a very successful movie career,
If
alone
for those
and with Gene Wilder.
for those of you kids on TikTok, you might come across an SNL sketch, a very famous SNL sketch that Richard Pryor did with Chevy Chase, where he's applying for a job and they have to do like a psychological test. So he does word association. And it starts off innocently enough, but very quickly Chevy Chase starts saying some racial slurs against black people to gauge Richard Pryor's reaction. And, you know, of course, it builds to Chevy Chase just dropping the N-bomb on live late night television. And Richard Pryor, very funny, he goes, dead, huh? He just says something like spear chucker, and he's like, honky. And he says something else like, honky, honky. And just getting agitated and more agitated. And finally, you know, he drops the N-bomb, ER and all. And Richard Pryor, dead, honky. And Chevy Chase is like, okay, you got the job. And it's like, please don't hurt me. You know, and here's the thing. It's not like anyone held a gun to Richard Pryor's head to do that sketch. I wouldn't be surprised if he co-wrote that. And I bring it up because it's a really great example of Richard Pryor being a very smart man, very intuitive in how the world works and his place in it, and a willingness to be vulnerable. I mean, he gets over on Chevy Chase by the end of it. But he gets over on Chevy Chase by being like the angry black man, you know, by being violent and threatening. And Chevy Chase kind of being, you know, a wormy white guy, which was funny. And I think it unfortunately also relatable for a lot of people. And Richard Pryor knew that. A lot of, you know, I was thinking a lot about how Richard Pryor, I would never say that he delves into like minstrelly territory, but he comes close at times. I'm sure that was one of when we get to the toy, there are elements of that where I'm like, I can see why critics didn't like this. I mean, I think it's great, but it's definitely at times an uncomfortable movie.
Oh yeah,
and I think Richard Pryor was very much aware of those things. I mean, you look at Richard Pryor's body of work between his sketch comedies, shows, his feature-length movies, his television appearances, and his stand-up. He didn't need. There comes a point where he doesn't have to do what he's doing, but he's choosing to. He's choosing to play into some stereotypes. He's choosing to kind of play into what some would say are some of the worst qualities of black culture. And he's doing it, I think, one, because he knows it makes money. But I think it's also an opportunity for him to... It's like he's not afraid to satirize the black community himself. Like, again, I compare him a lot to Red Fox and some of these other guys that grew up poor and black, like, you know, Chris Rock being another example. Where they look at they look at the deficits of black culture and go, this needs to be made fun of, just as every other white person who goes into comedy makes fun of their own culture. You know, the George Lopez's of the world, making fun of Latino culture, you know, Cheech and Chong, that sort of thing. You know, Richard Pryor was not afraid to look at black culture and go, here's the problem. And if he did it on stage in front of white people, he was perfectly happy to do so, which I commend him for. Something I talked about last night, where, you know, he's not going to treat his own culture like a Fabergé egg, which I think is laudable.
Yeah, and he's going to be at the forefront. And that's what's lost in a lot of things today is people are too sensitive. You know, you brought the famous Chevy Chase sketch with him up. Could you imagine seeing that on television today?
The closest thing is when Michael Che and whoever the white anchor is on SNL write jokes for each other. And Michael Che always writes the most racist thing for the white guy who laments that he's going to get killed in the parking lot if this continues. And it's really funny. But it's almost like the reverse of what we're talking about with Chevy Chase and him.
Yeah, but I mean, just could you imagine somebody's head would explode, literally. But you got to look at things in the sphere that comedy legends such as Richard Pryor, such as Chevy Chase, knew the boundaries to push on that, on the racial tensions and stuff, and how to play that to just at the edge of being offensive and just pulling it back right before it became offensive.
50 years on, the take is always, don't say that, can't say that. We are living in a prohibitive minded culture. Don't say that. You can't say that. That's not the image we want. 50 years ago, in the time of Chevy Chase and Richard Pryor, it was very much of that exists, call it out, talk about it, make fun of it.
Well, and it brings back to the point of a famous interview between Mike Wallace and Morgan Freeman. When Morgan Freeman calls out, the only way to stop raising him is to quit talking about it. When you start putting labels on things, that's when you create the boundaries. That's when the racism exists. When you stop talking about and labeling everything as racism, and stop putting those labels, that's why it exists. And that's what they were famous for. You called out the racism, you called out the thing, and you see that a lot in the toy.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
I noticed this a lot, and it's funny looking. I always talk about looking at things through 2024 glasses. I watched this with 2024 glasses on, and it was really eye-opening, and it was really funny because I watched it with the family, and the conversation of, that's offensive, you bought a black guy. But the point was missed, and Kinsey actually brought it up, is, you're missing the point. It wasn't you bought a black guy. He was buying a friendship.
Right.
And it wasn't, you're looking at the color of his skin, not the fact that the kid never had a true friend. He thought that he could buy anything he wanted.
Do that same movie with
buy a friend.
Do that same movie with Robin Williams. Nobody has a problem with him buying Robin Williams.
Right.
because now it's not you didn't because but the movie's even cognizant of that. We'll get into it more when we talk about the movie, but there's a whole thing where Fancy, the character Fancy, brings him to the table, and she basically is just like, "Who wants to buy a black guy? We did, and it worked out great." Jackie Gleason has to like fucking take her away, like, "Hey, get out of here with that." So the movie, and the movie like definitely brings up like, hey, slavery ended. That's not what this is, and it's like he gets paid for his time. It's never once like an indentured servitude or slavery, but there is an element of of feeling like demeaned by and the movie talks. The movie isn't racist; it's classist. That's what the movie deals with. But because the comedian in the movie, the toy, is a black guy, everyone goes for the low-hanging fruit and thinks that's what the movie is about. And to the movie's almost discredit, it brings that up too. It's like, it has to make a big deal out of the fact that he's black and make slavery jokes. And then, expects the audience to move past it. And it's like, nope, the audience is just going to get stuck there. But I wanted to talk about another. So later on in his film career, he also did a movie called Moving. And
I love Moving.
I wanted to talk about Car Wash. I wanted to talk about Brewsters Millions and the toy. So we only can pick 3, and there's a shit ton of movies. Like, we didn't do any of the Gene Wilder stuff. There's just shit tons of Richard Pryor that we could have talked about. We landed on these 3, but if I had gunpoint, had to lose Car Wash because it's not really a Richard Pryor movie so much as he's just in it at one point, I would have picked Moving. Moving is fucking hysterical. Like, again, most of my memories of Richard Pryor are of his stand-up and some very specific movies that I've seen. And Moving is one of them. I'm like, I gave him the wrong finger. Give me back my shit. I mean, and it's so funny because Richard Pryor is not an action hero. He's not an action guy. He does very funny, like, he does a lot of physical comedy. But a lot of his stuff is just rapid fire. I think he described as like ribald comic stuff. It's kind of riffing on people as he's moving through the movie. And there's a scene in Moving at the end where he's literally doing action stuff to get his furniture back. It's great. That also starts the late great King Kong Bundy. I could have very easily slid Moving in here. Moving to this day still cracks me up. Which one of your favorite long-standing Richard Pryor movies?
I mean, Moving and The Toy are probably my 2 favorite Richard Pryor movies.
Mm-hmm.
I'd only seen bits and pieces of Brewsters Millions.
Okay.
I never had there's been parts of it that I'd seen, like just increments, like clips and here and there that I remember. But watching it all the way through, I had never done that till this. Car Wash I had never seen, and the fact that when I was researching it, the term for Richard Pryor's participation in this was, he labeled it his coked out cameo because he was so high on cocaine that he doesn't even remember doing the part. He was told that he done the part, and he had to see the movie to actually remember that he was in the movie.
What's funny about the marketing for Car Wash? We can kind of just slide into the movie now. But so if you look at the poster of it, it's the whole cast. It's like a silver background, and they're all kind of in silhouette on top of a car. And then, like, for the DVD, for the Soul Cinema, every modern, reprocessing, republishing of the movie, it's of Richard Pryor and George Carlin. So I'm researching the movie, and every image I'm finding is the one I have up tonight. It's the blue bubbly background with Richard Pryor and George Carlin on the front. And then you look at the cast list, and they're at the bottom. Like, neither one has a huge part. Like, they're not part of the main cast. It's really funny.
Yeah, they're like Richard Pryor's a cameo, and George Carlin's maybe in the movie a total of 5 minutes.
Yeah, grand total. Anything else about Richard Pryor before we move on?
No, I think we've covered, our love for him and our background and introduction to him pretty well.
All right. Car Wash is a 1976 American comedy film released by Universal Pictures, directed by Michael Schultz, from a screenplay by Joel Schumacher of Batman and Robin fame. The film stars Franklin J., Bill Duke of Predator fame, George Carlin, Erwin Corey, Ivan Dixon, Antonio Fargas, Jack Cahoe, Clarence Muse, Lawrence Gary, the Pointer Sisters, the aforementioned Richard Pryor, and Garrett Morris. Originally conceived as a musical, Car Wash is an episodic comedy about a day in the lives of a close-knit group of employees at a Los Angeles, California car wash. And their boss, Leon Mr. B. Barrow, played by Sully Boyer. Car Wash breaks down like this. It opens up. We meet all the guys. They come to work. We see them at the different stations of the car wash. You have your waxers, you have your washers, you have your dryers, you have your register gal, you have your boss, the boss's ne'er-do-well son, you have a skateboarding kid, and then you have the customers. And each one of these guys has their own individual personality. They have their camaraderie, conflicts. We have what can be loosely described as the central conflict. One of the guys is like a newly turned Muslim, and he's not in love with a lot of what goes on at the car wash. And he keeps bumping heads with the white boss, and the white boss treats everyone fairly decently. He's just, it's never enough. It can never be enough. Black people are oppressed. It's the 70s. We're in the middle of Vietnam here. And he's just, there's guys that are there because they need to be there because that's the only job they can get. And they're happy to do it. And they kind of just shut up and, make the best of it if they can. And then here's this guy deconstructing everything, being all pissed off and Muslim about it. And everyone's kind of telling him, would you please shut the fuck up? Like, we're fine. Stop rooting for the rest of us. More to the point, the boss is like, you don't come to work half the time to be doing all this bitching. And eventually he just fires him. Over the course of the day, you have another character who's very much into comic book characters, and he refers to himself as the Fly. And there's a pretty girl who works at a diner next door, and he is trying to get her to go on a date with him. They've already been on one date, and she was like, you are broke and dumb. No, thank you. So he's like trying to get her to go on the second date, and she's no. He ends up winning He ends up winning tickets from a radio show, and he's like, all right, last chance. And like, how much more attention do you expect me to pay to you? And here's a lesson for you ladies. Men are willing to chase you only so much. If you don't let us eventually catch you, we stop chasing. And he basically tells her that. So she, having heard him make a solid case, decides to go on the date with him. There's some other stuff that happens of zero consequence. And then it finally ends with the Muslim coming back to rob the place, and the old timer, the guy, who's working at the job because he's on parole and he's trying to take care of his kids and get his life back on track, basically tells him, like, I'm the ghost of Christmas future. Don't rob this place. It won't work out for you. It's going to be bad. He's like, right, but what else am I supposed to do? I can't work in a meaningless, pointless job for the rest of my life. I got to do something. He was like, yes, but, robbing the place isn't it. And that's more or less where the movie ends. Richard Pryor, for his part, plays, what's the character's name? Daddy Rich.
Yeah,
and he's like, think like a phony preacher. The Pointer Sisters are with him, and everyone's very much into Daddy Rich except for the Muslim guy who thinks he's full of shit. And Richard Pryor is like, I don't care that you think I'm full of shit. I'm rich and you're not. How about that? And then Richard Pryor takes off and we never see him again. So I like Car Wash. I think, and I wanted to read this to you because I thought this was fantastic. Let's see if I can find it again. So it has an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. Oh yeah, in 2023, in the year of our Lord, Car Wash was named by a group of film experts as one of the 75 most culturally significant films by Black directors. What do you think about that, Jason?
That's interesting.
What do you think about the movie, Jason?
The movie itself was interesting. I had higher expectations because going into this, I thought it was going to be more predominantly Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
Because even in the beginning of the movie, they set it up because they have the plaque and the picture, the frame picture, and the plaque of Richard Pryor. So you think that he's going to play a bigger predominant role,
right?
And then you kind of realize, no, it's not that.
I almost called you. It said like we might need to pick a different film, but
no.
Look, when 75 people agree that it's one of the most important films by a black director, I was like, well, we'll just keep it in there then.
I can understand why it was, because it shows it shows a snapshot of Los Angeles at that time. And it's basically the turning of, I guess you could say the turning of the page. And they kind of touch on a little bit. The kid asks, why do you still do the hand washing and everything? And he says, it's the personal touch, and everything. And, you kind of see that they're kind of holding on to that. And, if it wasn't for that, some of these people would not have jobs. You have the ex-con that, he has that job simply because he's paroled, and that's the only job he can get because he is an ex-con. And he goes in, he does his work. His parole officer shows up, which creates some tension and stuff because he's there. He's keeping his nose clean. He's showing up for work and everything. And you see kind of like the family camaraderie that this car wash actually has. You see that how they interact with each other, the trials and tribulations of a daily thing, and and the song even tells you never know who you're going to meet. You actually meet a guy that's in a full body cast. You have a big Doberman Pinscher that shows up. It's the intricacies of what's going to happen today. The kid that just throws up everywhere.
Oh my God, I love that. The mom's like, "Don't you throw up in this car? Don't you throw up in this car?" And he gets his head out. He gets the side of the car. And she's like, "All right, clean that." And they clean up the car. They clean the kid up. She's like, "All right, are you done throwing up?" Yeah. Proceeds to throw up all over her in the car. It's a very relatable kid moment.
You just see kind of how this is basically a patchwork family for the employees there. And the everyday struggle is that just going to what some people think of a mindless job is basically a salvation for somebody that works there. And the funniest thing that I thought was the fact was the one bit where they think the guy is the pop bottle bomber.
Yeah.
and only thing he had a procedure and he can't piss, so he went and pissed in a bottle, and he's taking it to the doctor, the urologist, and they think he's the pop bottle bomber, and they tackle him and stuff, and then they go, "It's just a bottle of piss." and the owner, the manager or everything of the car wash tries to make up for it by giving him a free wash. Right. And he's like, "I haven't been able to go for 4 days, and that's the first time I've been able to go." And he's really distraught because And he thinks that just wash these car for free is going to make up for like this, and like he's really trying to sell it, and it's just like kind of a funny moment.
Yeah, I like Car Wash. I like again, kind of similar to the toy. It talks about classism. That struggle between the worker and the boss, I think is interesting because the boss is like, I'm trying to keep this place running. Like, for all intents and purposes, he's being honest. He's got to make a profit. With a little mini economics lesson here. Without profit, there's no motivation to start a business, which I think people forget. No one starts a business out of the goodness of their heart. So it's like he's got to make a profit. But he is keeping a large staff on here, which means he has a large payroll he has to meet. And he's managing a lot of different personalities. And some of it they're self-managing in that, like, they want to be there, at the very least they want to make their money. But it kind of also reminded me of Taxi, where Jeff Conway is an actor, or Tony Danza is a boxer. I can't remember something Merriweather, if that's her actual name. She was doing something, and then Judd Hirsch was an actual taxi driver. But I remember, like, everybody that worked for Sunshine Taxi Company had another job. Like, they were just working as a taxi. They were just driving a taxi until they got, until their big dreams came true. And that's kind of what is going on at Car Wash. You have the two guys that have some sort of entertainment act going, and they just have to get through this day, and then they can go on their audition, and they're gonna make it to the big time. Some guys are just there, it pays the bills, but they're thinking about love, they're thinking about life, they're thinking about having to raise their kids, and so there's a lot of incentive to self-regulate and do the job. But the boss has to, but they can get over on the boss, they will. And then so there's the boss going, no, you can't. And that's like the big conflict between him and the Muslim guy. Where the Muslim guy's like, this is all beneath me. You're having me do meaningless monkey labor. And he's like, well, then don't be here then. Like, I'm running a business. I'm running a business. I don't know what you want from me. You work, you get paid. You don't get paid. And so for kind of like a weird, funky, and that's the other thing. This is almost like, they talked about being conceived as a musical. It's almost operatic in that, like, I don't think there's a frame of fucking film that goes by where there isn't music playing. And boy, do you hear Car Wash a lot. I had that stuck in my fucking head the entire time. I'm dying tonight. Overall, I can see where Car Wash is definitely a product of its time. I can see where it's important. Not the greatest vehicle for Richard Pryor or Man of the Hour, but I think in the one scene that he has, it's a very Richard Pryor moment. He's the king of the court in the one scene that he's in. He's matching wits with Bill Duke, who is just angry, and and he's getting the better of him because, and I think people can relate to this. You might have all the facts, you might be serious, but if a guy with a lot of charisma comes along, he's going to beat you 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
People like a showman. They don't like a know-it-all. So that's why he gets over in that scene, and he does a really good job with it. So I'll give you the final word on Car Wash, and then we'll move on to Brewsters Millions.
I mean, it's a great movie. Like I said, it gives you a snapshot for the time and era, and definitely something to go and look and appreciate. Seeing, I think it is a good movie to watch as part of cinematic history.
Here's what I'll tell you: if you're a '70s film person, you need to watch Car Wash. If you're not like a film snob, if you're not a film historian, if you're not an appreciator of '70s film, you might want to skip this one.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
All right. Brewsters Millions. Um, much like A Star Is Born, is based on like the same property, and it's like one of a million adaptations. Brewster's Millions is a 1985 American comedy film directed by Walter Hill. It stars Richard Pryor, the late John Candy, Lynette McKee, Stephen Collins, and Hume Cronin. The screenplay by Herschel Weingrod and Timothy Harris was based on the 1902 novel of the same name by George Barr McCutcheon. It is the 7th film based on the story. So this one was made on a budget of $15 million, and it made about $45.8 million. So, tight little profit there for that film. When back when budgets were not astronomical. So, Richard Pryor plays a relief pitcher. He's down in the minor leagues, and he dreams of getting back into the big game. And he's like, I can strike anybody out in 3 innings. Just give me 3 innings against the Yankees, toughest team, and I'm going to win the game for you. And he goes out with his team and John Candy, who's his big loud, big fat Hawaiian shirt party having friend, and they get in a bar fight and they get kicked off the team. But lo and behold, turns out he is the sole heir to like an oil fortune, and his great granddad happens to be, as the film says, a honky, like you do. And so, said honky wants to leave him $30 million. And if he can spend the $30 million in 30 days, then he get his real inheritance of $300 million. Now, the investment house that's managing this money wants that for themselves. So the game is afoot. He has to spend the $30 million in 30 days. He can't have any assets at the end of it. Like, he can't own anything. He has to, rent it all or pay for services. He can't just throw the money away. He can't give it all away. And the services have to be legitimate. Like, he can't pay a guy to breathe next to him. And like I said, he can't own anything by the end of the 30 days. But here's the real trick of this, and this is where the whole tension of the movie is. He can't tell anyone. So, Jason, if you were given $30 million and you start spending like a moron, because that's the game, but you can't tell anyone, so you're spending like a moron and everyone's watching you do it, and everyone's like, but why, Jason? Why did you spend all your money on hookers and blow? And you're like, don't you think you should save some of it? Like, we have a mortgage. You could use it to pay for that. Can't tell you. So you'd seem like a crazy person. And that's kind of the whole thing with the movie. The love interest is an accountant that gets attached to him, and she's, liberal, progressive, holier than thou, and wondering why the fuck is this maniac spending all of this money. And he can't tell her, and because she's the only girl in the movie, he's in love with her, because that's movies for you. The other central, tension of the movie is because he can't tell anyone why he's spending the money, and he's trying to spend it as fast as possible. His friend, John Candy, keeps trying to get him to make money. Hires, a financial advisor, and all this stuff happens. So, there's a lot of, Richard Pryor spending money frivolously, and it end up it's like the producers. I did everything wrong. How did I win? There's a whole thing in the beginning where he's, just making bad investments. One's, in an iceberg. I'm going to buy this iceberg, and we're gonna drive it to the Middle East. John Candy, there's just no farmers in the desert, Monty. There's no farmers. There just isn't. And some company ends up buying the iceberg, and he ends up making all of his money back. And he's like, "What the fuck?" In another scene, he bets on all long shots in a field hockey game just to do it. And God, I wish I had this kind of luck. And he wins every single bet to the point where the guy's like, I will never take another bet from you again.
No, to the fact that all the bookies will ban him from ever betting betting on anything ever again because he hits all the long, because he hits the old Marymount field hockey bet against one of the top ranked teams, and they end up ends up being like 17-0.
Yeah. So so everyone thinks he's a nut job. The love interest, is like, at first she's mildly annoyed with him, and then he kind of wins her over with charm. And then there's a scene where they get like rear-ended, and he's like trying to like pay the guy, and she's like, he's clearly ripping you off. And he's like, I don't care. She's like, you know what? I can't deal with you. You spend money like a moron, and I have principles. So she walks away from him. The movie and it's like there's only so many times they can do that gag before it gets boring. So then the movie changes paths really quickly because he can't figure out how to spend all of this money, and he's like kind of beaten at this point. He's like, I think he had spent a substantial amount of money between paying for services like he's got private security. He gives John Candy's character money, in a job, and he's paying for this and paying for that, and he's renting a suite, and he's taking everybody in New York City out for lunch at one point. And then, but between the iceberg thing and the bets and everything else, he ends up right back where he started again. And he's like, what the fuck? I can't give this money away. So then there's a race going on, a race for mayor in New York City in the 80s. Okay. So totally believable. The two scumbags are running for mayor of New York City. So he decides, and and pay attention, kids. If you ever have $30 million that's burning a hole in your pocket, run for office. You'll own nothing, and you'll spend a lot real fast. So he does a campaign of vote none of the above. It's hilarious. And in true American fashion, he becomes the most popular guy in the race. To the point where he like almost fucking becomes mayor. And he has to sit out. He has to sit out the race. He has to withdraw. He doesn't actually want to be mayor. And he gets reminded by one of the guys running this whole thing, running the scam, that if he wins the race for mayor, he gets a salary, and like he can't keep it. It's an asset. So he's like, "Fuck!" He quickly pulls out of the race. And none of the above wins, and the New York is spared two scumbags for mayor. He also spends his own money to play the Yankees. There's a really great bit where he's like, Charlie, don't take the bus. And so they're trying to get the team to come to New York to play, and he flies them in a helicopter. He's like, okay, where's the practice field? It's on Long Island. It's fucking Jerry Orbach, who plays the coach. Like the fuck, we just came from Long Island. He's like, yeah, I couldn't get the helicopters like on the field or whatever it was. And, Jerry Orbach's like, right, because you can't have baseball without helicopters, you bag of dicks. So anyway, the Hackensack Bulls play the New York Yankees. It's a fun little scene, but at the end of the day, his magic with striking people out fails him, and that's the end of his baseball career, sadly. Robert Winfrey in with a pitch here. He should have just jumped forward to 2024. Could have blown $30 million just on gas and renting a place in New York over the course of a week. Well,
that's true.
Anyway, so he gets to the last day. He spent his last dollar, so he thinks, and he goes in, and then because they were cheating, they had a man on the inside. One of the villains of the movie gives him $20,000. Like, oh, it was misplaced. So he's about to give up. And then the love interest finds out the truth. And she's like, no, I am righteous and I am good. And I can't let this happen. I am woman in the 80s. So in a very telenovela fucking dramatic moment, Richard Pryor corners the villain, Warren. And he's like, you did this to me, you son of a bitch. And, and he put, and he says something like they insinuate that like him and the girl are sleeping together, which they never did. So Richard Pryor punches him. He's like, I'm going to sue you for everything you've got. He's like, great, I need a lawyer. So he's like, how's about a $20,000 retainer? Great, you need a receipt. She writes in the receipt in the ta-da nick of time, and he wins $300 million. There's a conspiracy to defraud charge. And just like in Trading Places, the old white men get it in the end, Jason. They always get it in the end. There's like a pattern of this in the 80s. Like, it's just, comedy writers having a big problem with old white men. But that's Brewster's Millions. Like I said earlier, it is, besides Superman 3, my most vivid memory of a Richard Pryor comedy. It's one of the examples, like I was reading through some of the critic reviews, and it's like people didn't like it because it doesn't really let Richard Pryor be off the rails Richard Pryor. It's not, they don't allow him to be as zany or sharp or as biting in this movie, which I'm okay with, because instead it's a movie about a guy who's down on his luck and he's never had this kind of money before, and he's figuring out what to do with it. And he's kind of learning along the way. And I think having some quiet moments of reflection, and not like, there were times in the movie where I would get frustrated because he was being a little too much Richard Pryor instead of like, an actual human being. And then there were times where he was being a human being, and I actually enjoyed those moments more. So I think Richard Pryor is better than the critics think it is when they get off their high horse about how they think Richard Pryor should act. What do you think, Jason?
See, I disagree. I think that you did have Richard Pryor in this movie, because like in the beginning, you have Richard Pryor when they're in the bar.
Yeah.
And they're trying to pick up the girls, and they go to jail, and they're standing in front of the judge, and John Candy's like talking, and he's like, he does not speak for me. I have no idea. He is not speaking for me. No, he's speaking for himself. He does not speak for me. And you see him, and like, he's trying to, he said he thinks he's gonna go play for the Mets. And then you have him being like kind of unhinged because he doesn't know what's going on. He's out of his element. Because he wants to tell everybody what's going on, but then he has to hold back, and he's like trying to navigate this. You get Richard Pryor being unhinged, but he can't go too far with it. He has to.
It's subdued. He's more subdued in here than he is in some of his other more zanier roles. Yeah,
because it's like he wants to go. He's like, "You guys want to go to lunch? Let's go to lunch." And it's like,
we're gonna do business. Our business is business, so we're gonna do business, and let's go to business.
Yeah, and he like goes up to the big black security guard. He goes, "You look like you're good at security. I want you to get you and 30 other men, and you're gonna be my security team, and you're just gonna walk around with me, and I'm gonna pay you X amount of dollars." It was like, and just like he has no idea what he's doing, and he's just coming up with shit off the cuff, and it's trying to make sense, and that's him being him, because he's just trying to do everything off the cuff. And I think that's some of the best moments you get as Richard Pryor, is him trying to just figure it out and just being out of his mind and trying to work within a certain structure. He's trying to color within the lines, and he can't. Mm-hmm. And it's like he wants to be all over the place, but he has to color within the lines. And that's some of the best moments you get of Richard Pryor.
Can I tell you some of my favorite stuff with him and the leading lady? Who was she? Lynetta McKee as Angela Drake. Is when he's just given up on her. She's pissed him off one too many times. Like, there's at one point she leaves the suite. He's like, "What do you have to do? Get home before sundown, or you turn into a bat?" He starts making like big bat noises at her, which is really funny. Like, I like the fact that at least back in the day, they didn't write every man as a fucking simp. Like, she's hot. He wants her. He has money. There's no reason for her not to want him in his mind. But she rejects him out of hand, and he's like, "All right, fuck you then."
And they had chemistry, and the chemistry wasn't forced.
No, but again, so they could learn from, like, modern writers can learn from the guys who wrote Brewsters Millions. You don't have to have them all over each other to have sexual chemistry. There was a bit of like almost like Thrill of the Hunt. By the way, I had to laugh out loud because who hasn't been here? He tries, he chases, and finally he's like, fuck it, I give up. You don't want me, I don't care. I'm gonna move on. I have money. So he has another girl up in his suite, and they are about to make sweet, hot Richard Pryor Philly Flash love, right? And she calls him up, she's like, Monty, I need you. He's like, fuck. Damn it, I just got this other woman up here. I'm about to get laid. Like, you've rejected me every single time. I don't have time for this now. And she's like, Monty, come to me, Monty. And he's like, all right, well, I could have this floozy, but I'd rather have the hot, rich, light-skinned chick. So let me go down there and see what that's all about. And so he does, and it's a ruse, Jason. It's a ruse. She lied to him. She led him under false pretenses. Who amongst us can't relate to that sort of thing?
I think every guy can at one point in their life.
Yes, sir. I really like Brewsters Millions. It's one of those ones. I don't watch a lot of movies over and over and over again because I don't have an anxiety disorder. But this is one of those that for some weird reason or another, it's either when it's on TV, I'll sit and watch it, or I've just gone back and watched it a few times because it's just one of those movies from my childhood that it's in that sweet spot of I was really, really young. It's really, really funny. It's relatable. It's a story I could follow. There were some movies from my childhood that I watch now and go, oh, that's what was happening? Okay, because I didn't follow it when I was a kid. I was, drawn in by the visuals or, some of the more outlandish comedy or whatever. But I didn't totally understand what was happening. Brewster's Millions, I've never not understood. He had $30 million in 30 days to spend it, and he couldn't spend it fast enough, and bad things kept happening to him to where he kept making money. Because even the election thing made sense to me as a kid. Like, okay, he's spending money on, on election stuff, and elections cost money. Even back then, I knew that. So, Brewster's Millions is on my short list of movies that I'll actually watch on repeat. And weirdly enough, I don't think I've ever showed it to my kids. Like, that's one of, they don't need to see this one, but it's one of Daddy's little favorites. It's Daddy's little keepsakes. I'll give you the last word here on Brewster's Millions.
I mean, a really good movie. And you can't overlook at the supporting role John Candy plays in this.
I don't know. He's just kind of being John Candy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can't overlook it because, he plays it just enough as the quirky best friend that you play off of. That's trying to. He kind of holds the supporting role just enough to try to. He drives Monty crazy enough to be as
Spike,
a supporting best.
Spike, you're beautiful, man. You're beautiful.
He's you see the love of the friendship is that he's wanting to look out for Monty, but again he's trying to sabotage him in every way possible by doing so.
Yeah.
And it's you see the struggle, and he means well, but he's in turn him meaning well is driving Monty crazy. And it's like Monty just wants to tell him everything and he can't. And it's just like you see that struggle because they have that chemistry of friendship. And yeah, this is something, I can catch myself definitely watching it again and or at least having it on the background while I'm doing something in the house, through the house or something.
I'll tell you, we were talking last night about, the raunchy sex comedy is gone. They tried to revive it with no hard feelings, and no one working on that movie understood what the raunchy sex comedy is. And we've just lost so many elements of classic movie making over the years. And I'll tell you, between this and Trading Places and some other movies, old white men versus young black guys, we need to get back to that. Can we get more of those movies again? Jesus Christ. I want to see more old white men, end up impoverished after a 90-minute movie. You know, when the young black comedian, turns the tables on him. Like, where are those movies, Jason?
I'll say that because you're going to put it out in the universe, and you're going to see this being remade.
God, can you imagine?
You're going to see this or Trading Places try to be remade.
I don't think you could make Brewsters Millions again in 2024. Though I said the same thing about Dune, so who knows? All right, our last movie is The Toy, the most controversial of the three movies here. The Toy is a 1982 comedy film directed by Richard Donner of Superman fame. The film stars Richard Pryor, Jackie Gleason, Ned Beatty, Scott Schwartz, Teresa Gansel, and Virginia Capers. It is an adaptation of the 1976 French comedy film La Jouet. You're welcome. It was a budget of $17 million. It made $47 million. So despite being critically panned, and boy was it ever, it's got a 3% on Rotten Tomatoes for 30 critics. A muddled, unfunny collision of two comedic titans. The Toy is unsuitable for children or anyone else seeking entertainment. Metacritic gave it a score of 16 based on 8 reviews. Overwhelming dislike. This film opened the same weekend as Airplane 2 in 48 hours and finished number 1 for the weekend. Despite the bad reviews, the film was a financial success in the US and Canada. I don't think people understand this movie. I think people kind of watch it with, critical race theory eyes, and they go, oh, it's about a white kid buying a black man. It's automatically bad. Misses the whole fucking point of the movie. But here's what happens. So Richard Pryor is a writer. He's out of work. He has no money, and his house is going to get taken from him that he got, he inherited. So he needs money, and he needs it fast. And this is taking place in South Louisiana. There's only one game in town, and that's Bates Industries, and he's trying to get a job. He's been trying to get a job with them as a reporter, but to no avail because it's 1982, and we don't yet have, quotas for black hires.
DEI doesn't exist.
Yeah. So anyway, so he gets a job as a maid, complete with French maid uniform, because this movie gets a little stupid. Working in the Bates mansion, and it goes poorly. It's a really great bit because it's like it goes to Richard Pryor's character in this movie, where the table's all set up. This long table is set up for everyone to have lunch at, and Jackie Gleason sits down, and instead of just moving his chair to the table, he pulls the table to him. So now everyone's place is off center, and they're all having to figure out where lunch is. And Richard Pryor's like, "No, that's fucked up. That's not how you treat people." And so he just pulls the table back. He's like, no. The table was here. This is where everyone would say. And because Bates is so powerful and he's likely to fire anyone that disagrees with him, he's the king. Everyone will inconvenience themselves to accommodate him. Except Richard Pryor is like, no, that's bullshit. And one of the funnier exchanges of the movie, he walks over. He's got a mustache. He's wearing this fucking French maid outfit. Jackie Gleason looks at him and is like, you're hairier than our usual girls. And he's just covering his mouth. Like, what's he supposed to do? And then there's they're dropping hot soup on each other, and it's a whole thing. Jackie Gleason and Richard Pryor are fun together. So Richard Pryor has already threatened Ned Beatty once, who works for Jackie Gleason. Basically, if you don't give me a job, I'm going to make trouble. I'm going to claim racism. I'm going to make a scene. It's going to look bad for you guys in the press. So they're willing to give him some sort of menial labor job just to shut the fuck up. And they do. The French maid thing doesn't work out very well for him, as you might expect. But he gets a job cleaning at a toy store that Bates owns at night. And because Richard Pryor is mildly retarded, I don't know how else to explain this. In order for the movie to happen, I feel like it's a pitch meeting moment. He can't just clean the store. He has to play with the toys. He has to do so in the most moron fashion possible. where first he's like throwing a football at mannequins, like knocking them over and shit. And at one point, there's like this whole thing called Wonder
The
Wheel.
Wonder Wheel.
It's like the most famous part of this movie. Richard Pryor couldn't just leave the fucking thing alone. He has to get in the Wonder Wheel, and he makes it go, and so it does. And all the while, Jackie Gleason's son is back from is on spring break from military school. And the problem here is that Jackie Gleason's happy to have him around. He doesn't actually want to do anything with him. He's like, oh, I'll have my new wife, Fancy. Which, again, I'm not having any more kids. But if I should happen to bring another person into this world, Jason, her name is going to be Fancy Radulich. Just want you to know that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, Fancy, don't let me down. Here's your one chance, Fancy. Don't let me down.
That's right. So
Forgive me
Fancy.
for what I do.
So Jackie Gleason's like, oh, I'll have, the German childcare person take you. He's like, I don't want that. I'll have Fancy take you. I don't want that either. I want you to take me, Dad. Pay attention to me, Dad. The cat's in the cradle and the soul of a spoon. You know what I mean? Jackie Gleason's like, I don't like you as a friend. So that leads to him saying, you can go to one of my toy stores. You can have anything in the toy store that you want. And so he is watching this boob bumblefuck around this toy store. And he gets to the Wonder Wheel, and he's like, oh, Wonder Wheel. And the Wonder Wheel goes, and of course, because again, Richard Pryor, mentally retarded, ends up puncturing the thing. It deflates, and he's like there was more drama in him sinking into the Wonder Wheel than Boba Fett is in the Sarlacc pit of Return of the Jedi. Oh, Wonder Wheel! So dumb. It's funny, but it's funny because you just turn your brain off and laugh at the stupid. Again, everything I said about Richard Pryor's acting went right out the fucking window here. Like, hey, how minstrelly will you be? And Richard Pryor's like, well, how minstrelly do you need? Like, we need you to lose a wrestling match to an inflatable wheel. All right, I'll bump for the wheel. And so he does. And the kid sees Richard Pryor and just thinks he's the bee's knees. He's fucking hilarious. So, and I think this is where people struggle with this movie. The kid goes, I want him. And the people all working for Mr. Bates, for Jackie Gleason, are like, what, the Wonder Wheel? Like, no, jackass. I want the man. I want the black man. Like, you can't have a black man. Slavery ended in the 1800s. A lot of that in this scene. Long or the short of it is, between Ned Beatty and Jackie Gleason, and the fact that Richard Pryor desperately needs $10,000 to save his house, they agree after some time that he will spend the week with the kid and be basically his playmate. And there's a lot of back and forth, and Richard Pryor I've had fucking enough of you. A lot of their interaction is basically the kid needs a father figure, needs someone to tell him no. And Richard Pryor figures that out fairly quickly, and they bond. That's the first third of the movie. The second third, the kid's got a real bee in his bonnet for the dad, and he feels look, all kids are born liberal, progressive, panty waist, right? And so,
right.
And then there's Jackie Gleason, evil conservative business owner, dumping toxins in lakes and shit. And so the kid looks at his father, and he's like, "You won't pay attention to me. You do bad things. People will sell their souls for money for you." And Richard Pryor's like, does anyone remember when I just wanted to be a reporter? Does that ever enter anyone's mind? So they make a fake paper exposing all of Jackie Gleason's evil deeds. And Jackie Gleason's like, what the fuck? I said play with the kid, not, do yellow journalism. Which then ends with Richard Pryor and the kid upending one of his big fancy parties where we have politicians and the Ku Klux Klan mingling. And of course, this is the big evil. So Jackie Gleason falls in a pool trying to kill Richard Pryor. And Richard Pryor saves him. Jackie Gleason and the kid have a moment where, after some time, they reconcile, which then causes Jackie Gleason to reach out to Richard Pryor and say, hey, through you, I was able to see the error of my ways. I should spend time with my son. My son doesn't see me as a complete bag of shit anymore, and I guess I have you to thank for that. So having a job on the paper, and next year he can spend a week with me and a week with you, and Richard Pryor's like, that's cool. I really just want the job. So the kid goes back to military school, and all is well that ends well. The thing about this movie that I think gets overlooked because it's a black guy, not a white guy that gets bought, is everyone focuses on the race and, of the buying of the person, and not on the classism story that's being told. Because there's a lot of talk in this movie about, selling out your soul for money, and the kid being an idealist, as all kids are, like, don't you have principles? Don't you have ideals? Don't you think we should do the right thing at all costs? And Richard Pryor's like, I have fucking bills to pay. Like, I get what you're saying, kid, but you're rich. You're going to land on your feet no matter what happens to you. I fuck up. I lose my house. I lose my wife. I lose everything. And I don't have a rich dad to bail me out. That's a classism story. Completely overlooked because 20 minutes before he says that, he's wrestling with an inflatable wheel. There's a lot, the scene, again, it's like, hey, here's $10,000. Distract my kid for a week. I just want to look good. I want to look good and be seen parenting. I don't actually want to parent. I want to, hook a senator up with a Klan member. That's what I want to do. And so that's all like on the hush hush. And Richard Pryor's like, all right, I dig your vibe. I'll be hush hush about it. And then there's Fancy, right? This blonde, bimbo-ish Southern gal who's like, no, this is kind of fucked up, and I'm gonna make a scene now, like all women do. And she drags Richard Pryor to this fancy dinner and basically auctions him off. And Jackie Gleason runs at them like a fucking fullback. It's like, get out of here, threatening to God, 1982. Do you need to go back to the loony bin? I miss those days. When you could threaten a hysterical woman when you could threaten an inpatient, when you can threaten a hysterical woman with inpatient fucking hospitalizations. Again, that's a classism story. That is I'm going to do bad things, but I don't actually want to be, I don't want to be fucking seen doing it. I don't want you to make a big deal about it. And I expect everybody to toe the line. And when people stop, you have to use force and violence and all kinds of bad shit to get them back in line again. That was a very real moment in that movie. And it gets, I think, overlooked because it's kind of silly. I don't think people see the gravity of it. The kid and Richard Pryor, I think, have the kid and Richard Pryor have really good chemistry. At the end of the movie where the kid's like, I love you. And Richard Pryor's like, I love you too. It's again, it's one of those things where sure, you hire Richard Pryor to, to bump for an inflatable wheel. But what you get is really tender moments of Richard Pryor acting like a human being with this kid. Well, I think this is his feature debut. And, for a shitty kid who learns lessons about life and learns to not be a bag of shit by the end of it, I just think he did a really good job. So what did you think of the toy?
I love the toy. I think it's one of the few movies I could just sit back and watch and just really just tune out and watch and enjoy, not have anything else to worry about. And you said that this is the young kid's feature debut. He went on to do porn later on.
Nice.
Yeah, I've seen that little tidbit. Researching it, and I thought that this would be the perfect time and show to bring that up on, because why not discuss a child actor that goes on to do porn. But yeah, this is really a movie that, like you said, a lot of people miss the purpose behind it. They see a black guy getting bought, they immediately jump to the racism and stuff.
Right.
When in actuality, it's the story of a father neglecting his son,
right,
who is a spoiled brat that is never told no because his father would rather buy his love than show affection. And so the only thing he knows how to do is buy affection. So he wants to buy a best friend. And that's what ends up happening.
Yeah, I think that I still laugh at a lot of this movie. Sorry, and it's funny because like Richard Pryor in the toy, but Jackie Gleason has some of the funniest lines in this movie. Not the least of which is "That's not an ashtray, you asshole."
Yeah, it's the same exact thing on the other side.
Right. I wonder how much of that was improv. That line, like I watched it the other day at my girlfriend's house, and like Jackie Gleason's like the stuff at the lunch table where they're playing the table back and forth. Like, because Jackie Gleason very rarely, like, it's only till the end of the movie that he starts going like fucking full on, crazy. Up till that point, a lot of what he does is very straight faced. But and so people that may not know this because it's 2024 and a lot of the stuff was lost to time. But Jackie Gleason played, oh god, I can't remember the character's name, but he was on The Honeymooners. Famous for "To the Moon, Alice." Which Family Guy. You're gonna hit me so hard, I'm gonna go to the moon. You think that's funny? Well, not anymore. Like Jackie Gleason plays off Richard Pryor really, really well, but a lot of his stuff is like devoid of emotion. It's just very like like Alec Guinness in fucking Star Wars. He just says the line. So something like "That's not an ashtray, you asshole," still strikes me as really funny because he doesn't use any inflection and it's just direct at him. Like, how could you be this stupid? It's great. Even when he's threatening Fancy, he's just very straightforward about it. It's like he doesn't raise his voice. He's not like trying to be intimidating. He's just like, maybe you need another trip to the loony bin, and she knows he's, and it's like that Triple H reaction that Jack to Cactus Jack. Like if he doesn't react big enough, it doesn't work. Her reaction to him going, "I'm gonna, if you can't get your shit straight, I'm gonna send you back to the loony bin." And she's like, "Oh no, you ass." That actually has to be the funniest running gag in this whole movie. You ass. It's you ass.
Well, what's funny is the shots for this movie took twice as long because Jackie Gleason kept improvising all of his lines.
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't know how to react. And so the shots took twice as long because he would just improvise his lines. And people didn't know, people would keep forgetting their lines or messing up or something. And they really hated working with him because of it. So
I think people sleep on the toy because some of the setups are really silly. Like, okay, wrap him up, boys. And they literally put him in a box with holes like he's a fucking pet.
Well, and the fact he goes, "Oh, a nice bow," and then you come to find out that they put him in an actual box.
Right. So it's like my argument about like, hey, this movie's about class. This classism. This movie is about father and son. It's like, okay, but are you neglecting every single thing where they dehumanize this fucking guy? Like, kind of.
And some of the subtle things in it is funny because, like the nanny, when Richard Pryor's trying to leave the first night, he walks into her room and she's watching a Hitler documentary. And like, it's the subtle things like that. And she goes, "It's not what you're thinking." And like the fact that she keeps trying to come on to Richard Pryor,
mm-hmm.
and it's just like, and the fact that, they do address the Klan and the Southern hospitality, the good old boys of the South.
Yeah.
The fundraising for the Klan, and who can forget the picture that, and Richard Pryor calls him out on it. He said, "Man, you're no fun." It's like, he's just a teenage boy. He sees tits. it's a boy that sees tits. I mean, it's what teenage boys do. They get excited to see tits.
I think that's like my one criticism of the toy, though, is that there's a lot of setup for Jackie. Like at one point, he's talking about being under federal indictment, and none of that goes anywhere. Like by the end of the movie, he's just like, "Oh, Eric's going back to thing." Richard Pryor, you're going to work on the paper and everything, and all is well. All is well that ends well. We all learned lessons by the end of this movie. We all went on the hero's journey. It's fan great. It's like, wait, aren't you still under federal indictment? Aren't you being investigated? Like, and you were just seen with the Klan, were you not? Nothing. None of it goes anywhere. So it's like they threw all this stuff out. They just threw all this stuff into the movie, and like, well, the thing anyone cares about's all been resolved, so we'll just forget about the rest of it. It's like you can't really do that, though. That's not good writing. So it's not perfect. I don't think it's as. I think my argument is it's not 3% bad, on Rotten Tomatoes. It is better than people give it credit for. I mean, it's not Killers of the Flower Moon or anything like that, but it is better than I think people give it credit for. And I think, again, if you get past the premise, the silly premise of white boy buys black man film at 11, you actually have a really funny, enjoyable, entertaining, heartfelt movie about fathers and sons and relationships and maturity, and what does it mean to I was starting to say this before and I got away from it. The kids just digging into Richard Pryor, and Richard Pryor is like, I'm in an adult world playing adult games. Like I can't, I have to make compromises. It's a fight I get into with people on this network. It's a fight I get into with a lot of people where, look, would I like to be idealistic and do everything the right way all the time? Sure. Do I feel bad that sometimes I gotta do things I don't necessarily want to do for the greater good? The greater good? Sure. But I also understand that life's not perfect. And if you want to live that way, if you want to try to live the perfect life and make no compromises, I'm not taking that away from anybody. That's on you. But I got shit to do. I got bills to pay. I got kids to take care of. And sometimes I got to make compromises. And that's the point that Richard Pryor is trying to make. It's like, sure, I would like to ideally take down your dad and right the wrongs and see that justice is served and the evil are punished. But life rarely works out that way, and just to kind of round this to something going on right now, I was listening to Bret Hart's remarks on the Vince McMahon scandal, and Bret Hart said, "We knew Vince was a pervert back when I was working with him, but everyone was afraid to say something. He was too powerful then. It's no wonder it took this to, it took, what happened to this poor girl to get him thrown out of that company. And would he even have been thrown out had they not been bought by TKO? So, there's something to be said for sometimes there's just no fight in City Hall, and that's just the sad truth about life. And the toy talks about that, Jason. The toy talks about that.
All
right, anything else before?
No, I think we've covered everything that we can.
Yeah. So between your internet troubles and my coughing, we should probably call it. All right, that is our review of these three Richard Pryor films and the life and times of Richard Pryor. I'm glad we had a chance to talk about him. He's he's on my Mount Rushmore along with Dice Clay and Sam Kinison, Bill Cosby. I don't care what he did to the women; he's still funny. Richard Pryor. He's one of those guys that, like, when my son talks about, like, I want to study stand-up comedy, I want to understand how it works, and I want to see how you write it. Like, Richard Pryor is one of those guys I got to show him. He's a little stuck on Patton Oswalt right now, but Richard Pryor is one of the best. He's one of the great legends of stand-up comedy. So definitely a guy worth checking out. If you're one of these kids listening to this on a podcast or watching it on YouTube, and you're like, why Richard Pryor? Because without Richard Pryor, there is no Eddie Murphy, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock. There's no Cat Williams. None of these guys exist without Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor. One might say, well, without Red Fox, there's no Richard Pryor. Okay, how far back do you want to go? So, without Richard Pryor, you don't have modern black stand-up comedy. So that's what that is. Yesterday, myself, Alexis, and Robert, for half a second, Dorian, who fucking got into a car accident, got a concussion, and still made the show. So good man. Talked about Lisa Frankenstein. Tomorrow, Alexis is reviewing Has Been Hotel on Valentine's Day for some odd reason. Next week, myself and Robert Winfrey will test the limits of our friendship as we review Madam Web. Jason and I will be back. We're looking at Craig Brewer movies next week. Hustle and Flow, Black Snake Moan, and Dolomite Is My Name. As we kick the whiz off so we can just focus on Craig Brewer. And then Thursday, we're going to have fun. Hopefully I'll be over this cough. Ronnie Adams and Pat Mullen demanded we have fun on this network again. So we're doing a triple feature just to do it. We're looking at movies that took place in schools. Dangerous Minds, Lean on Me, and Stand and Deliver. All right, Jason, I don't want to talk anymore. You talk.
Yeah, you'll see me back here. Definitely looking forward to celebrating Black History Month while we cover a white director making black movies.
Yes, sir.
Looking forward to that. Kind of pulled the executive decision. Talking off air, kicked the whiz off. A little disheartening, but for the betterment of the flow of the show, we went that route. Still looking forward to the end of the month when we review one of my favorite movies, Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood, because always and forever we will always have a message for you here on the Red Legend Broadcasting Network. And that will be a long-running joke that a lot of people, long-time listeners, will get. And if you're new to the show, go back, look at the archives, and when we make that reference on show, you'll finally be caught up to when me and Mark or Robert make the reference of yelling out message. You'll know the origins for it, just like when Mark found out the origins of, for me, it was a Tuesday.
That's right.
We'll also, on that show, we'll be covering How High and what's the third?
I'm
third
going to get you, sucker.
I want to get you, sucker, which is has a Wayne's Brothers. And so that's going to be interesting. Really looking forward to Black Snake Moan. It's been on my to watch list.
Listen, if you're looking for a movie where an old black man chains up a blonde white girl, that is the movie for you.
Well, it's been on my watch list for quite some time. Just not really had the opportunity to sit down and watch it.
I watched Hustle and Flow on Monday, and I have not left my kids alone. I'm either yelling as hard out here for a pimp or whoop that trick. I'm trying to get my kids to blurt out whoop that trick in school, and they won't cooperate with me.
I think that would be either one of your kids yelling that out in school. I think would be absolutely hilarious.
Apparently, it'll get you suspended, from what I've been told.
Jonas would be the most logical one that I could hear. Really, I could just picture Lily just going, yelling that out and just blurting it out randomly. I think that would be the absolute funniest thing that I can imagine.
All right. I'm wrapping us.
So,
all right. Thank you, Jason, for joining me tonight in this look at Richard Pryor movies and our continued examination of black cinema. I'm Coffee McGee. Be well, be safe, and behave.